Hello, it's me, Arisia Gaming, and welcome to another episode of Sandbox Showcase, the series where I talk about problems in Oxygen Not Included and how you can solve them easily and effectively. So today, I want to talk about Mercury. This is a new metallic resource that was added as part of the Frosty Planet Pack DLC, and it was in the game in debug mode for a while, but now it actually appears in these nectar biomes where you find the Spigot Seals and the Bonbon Trees and the shine bugs. Usually on a Ceres asteroid, these Mercury biomes, all the shiny Mercury, will appear directly above the main pod location and the other surrounding biomes. And they will spawn in at a very cold temperature, around minus 60 degrees C. And there's a reason for this. Mercury, despite being a metal, has a very low melting point of minus 38.8 degrees C. What that means is, if you bring this into a normal base that's outside of this very cold biome, it will liquefy immediately. And compared to other liquids, it has a very low heat capacity of 0.014, but a very high thermal conductivity of 8.3. So it's a very good liquid for actually coating material that you want to cool, like a steam turbine. You might have a layer of mercury between it and the tile, so that you can cool it off with the coolant water, maybe. And it's a medium that you can transfer the heat through. But what I want to talk about today is, how can you use Mercury in your Frosty Planet runs, or perhaps if you find a Mercury biome shuffled into a normal asteroid that you're doing, how can you actually effectively make use of Mercury? So I'm going to talk through a few different use cases. The first one I want to talk about is liquid locks. So that's your standard sort of T-shape. What you could do is you can dig this out or melt it, and you could either use bottle emptiers or put in a storage bin. Put a storage bin here, dig out a load of solid mercury from a cold area, put it up towards your base, or you could use bottle emptiers to dump in mercury that's already a liquid. And if we just put some mercury in here to illustrate this, so we'll put some in here at, say, minus 35 degrees C. This actually stays as a liquid between minus 38.8 degrees C and 356.8 degrees C. So that's a very large temperature range. You can have your dupes bring in stuff at like 130 degrees C, and it's not going to cause this to boil, unlike a liquid lock made out of water. Obviously, the heat capacity is relatively low, even though the mass is high. So don't bring anything through this liquid lock that's hotter than 356.8 degrees C, or you might boil your mercury by accident. But generally, if you're not doing that, it's very useful as a liquid lock, because it's not going to breach under most circumstances, and it's quite dense. And you're going to have a lot of it available as well. So this is one use case you can use immediately for mercury. Now, the next one you might be thinking of is, it's a refined metal. Why don't I use it to build buildings out of? Well, there's a fairly obvious answer for this. Let's build a conductive wire of mercury. Here we go. And we'll just look at that. So it's spawned in at sort of minus 48 degrees C. But if we speed it up with our lovely test dupe, you'll see even in the oxygen, it's relatively quickly going to melt. Any other building that you build is also going to melt if you're putting it in an environment that isn't quite cold enough for it. It's going to take a little bit of time. But yes, what will often happen is you'll be building this out of another more useful refined metal. Yeah, see, now it's all melting immediately. You'll build it out of a more useful refined metal, and then you'll run out of that and it will switch to mercury, and then you'll wonder why all your buildings are melting. It will actually give you a notification now when this happens, so that's very good. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend building stuff out of this unless you're building it in an area that's specifically cooled below that temperature. But the reality is you're not going to want to cool an area below that temperature very often unless you're specifically trying to use the mercury in solid form. And that's going to waste power trying to cool down the area, so I wouldn't really recommend using it as a building material, apart from a very specific case, which I will talk about later. The main use I want to talk about with mercury is power generation. And this isn't immediately obvious, but there is a new building in the game called the Mercury Ceiling Light. It's a lamp that requires an intake of mercury, liquid mercury, and a small amount of power. It produces an extreme amount of light, and this extreme amount of light is enough to actually run solar panels. So oftentimes on these super cold asteroids, you're kind of struggling to find a power source. If you don't have a random geode of natural gas available, there's no hydrogen event available, your main option for power generation is going to be ethanol through a petroleum generator, because these floxes all produce wood that you can turn into ethanol. You're going to find pools of ethanol randomly about. There's probably what you're going to be leaning on. There's not really any coal or anything like that you can use. And the problem with the ethanol generators is they produce a lot of carbon dioxide. It's not very clean power at all. They also produce polluted water, which is rapidly going to freeze into polluted ice a lot of the time on these maps, which is of questionable use to you as well. So you get a lot of power out of it, but you also get a lot of byproducts out of it you don't necessarily want. What Mercury and the Mercury Ceiling Lamp actually allow you to do is to run solar panels and generate clean power using this fairly nuisance material that you find everywhere. And it lets you put that into a power source that lets you get your base to the point where you can transition to a more sustainable petroleum generator operation, where you're handling the carbon dioxide better, or maybe you're using slicksters. Maybe you found slicksters by then. So I'm going to show you how you can set up these Mercury Ceiling Lights to use mercury in a resource-efficient manner to produce power. So let's start by cleaning out some space. Right, so we've cleaned out some space. Let's start with the basics. We'll put in some tiles. I'm just going to use snow tiles for now because it's a nice cold area. We're just going to put these in a sort of 4-tile high arrangement, but we'll just put them on the top for now. Then we'll take our ceiling lamps and we'll put 2 right next to each other with a little one-sized gap in the middle. And then underneath that, we're going to put in a solar panel. You can put this directly underneath the lamps and it will get the maximum amount of light from them. You can also put it 1 tile below and it will still get the maximum amount of light. So we're going to put it 1 tile below. That's going to go there. Now, to make these solar panels, you do need radiation research. So you are going to need to harvest radiation from either shine bugs or wheezeworts or the radioactive biome. But there's no shortage of radiation on the frozen Frosty Planet asteroid in general. So you should be able to get that fairly quickly. And then you will also need to use a glass forge to make the glass. But again, you can set this up fairly quickly. You do need to find some rock to build it out of, which is a surprising challenge sometimes on these frosty asteroids. But make the glass forge, get a little bit of glass production going, and then you can make this. It's actually relatively quick if you focus on that research. So, what we want to do next is we want to find a way to move all of our mercury to the area where the lamps are going to be, so that it can get quickly and efficiently pumped into place. We put some snow tiles here. I think what I'm actually going to do is we're going to put some metal tiles in. You can put whatever tiles you want over here, but I'm going to use metal tiles in this case, because we quite actually want to keep the mercury liquid over here. We don't need it to be super cool in this region. So we'll make some metal tiles here. We'll heat them up via some other means. We'll just put a bottle emptier over here so that your duplicant can dump mercury in whenever they feel like it. And then we'll just put a little pump over here. We'll set that up with a hydro sensor so it doesn't pump when there's a relatively small amount of mercury left. So we'll set this to say above 50 kilograms. And then that can pump all the mercury into the lamps. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll just split it down here. It's going to go into the lamps. And then we're going to need some initial power to get this all jump started. I'll just put in a dev generator for now. We'll use some regular wires for this. This isn't going to cause any issues. And then we'll connect it up to the solar panel as well. And we're just going to spawn in a little bit of mercury, not quite that much. There we go. So we put some mercury in here. This is going to start pumping it into the lamps. The lamps are powered. We come in 10 kilograms at a time. And what you'll see happening is the light is going to start powering on. If we go down here, the moment it's filling up. So it says emitting light and powering up. So when you're filling the Mercury Ceiling Light with 130 grams per second of mercury, i.e. the usage rate, it will power up over the course of 60 seconds up to the point where it's producing its max amount of light. So it's also producing 1 kDTUs per second of heat. while it's operating. You can see the lux is increasing by 1,000 per second. You can go on the light overview and you can see that as well. It's gradually going to get lighter and lighter. And the solar panel is starting to build up in wattage. Now, if we just set up the Mercury lamps in a completely unautomated way, what will happen is this is going to power up all the way up to 100% in a minute. So there we go. So now it's at 100%, and it's consuming the 130 grams per second of mercury and 60 watts of power. But you'll notice the solar panel is actually now producing the maximum amount of power, and it's exact. So what this is giving us is because we're using 2 lamps, it's turning a net of 260 grams per second of mercury into 380 watts minus 2 times 60 watts for each lamp for 260 watts. So that's actually giving you 1 kilojoule of power for every kilogram of mercury consumed. This is not the best efficiency out of all the power sources. It's better than the wood burner, and it's about on par with the petroleum generator, but it's substantially less material efficient than the hydrogen and natural gas generators, for reference. But again, considering the mercury is more or less an inert waste product that you shouldn't really be using to build anything, and you're kind of struggling for early power sources in general on this asteroid, this is a pretty good use case for it. It helps you dispose of any excess mercury you end up digging up so that it's not clogging up your base. You can just dump it here. You can even use an automatic dispenser so that duplicates can pick up mercury debris and just dump it automatically in your pool where it's immediately going to melt, provided you give this at least a little bit of initial heat. And yeah, this could be a pretty good initial power source. You will eventually consume all the mercury, but quite a lot of mercury spawns on a normal asteroid. Even on the spaced out smaller version of the asteroid, you're going to find a fair amount of it. And frankly, it's often getting in the way of you actually building in this area, particularly if there's geysers. So you are probably going to want to put it all somewhere neatly eventually. If you're really determined, you can also set up an infinite storage for this, like we've set up on previous videos. Perhaps the saltwater geyser video, that would be a good case for this. And again, because it's a cold liquid, it's relatively safe to store in a infinite storage, so that can be a good idea, but I'm not going to go into that too much today. So, this setup can absolutely be improved in terms of efficiency, and what we can do is we can actually use half the throughput of mercury, because if we cut the mercury off, so let's actually just remove all this pipe. We'll spill all the mercury everywhere. That's great. So now you'll see, because the pipe is empty, the building is no longer using power, and the brightness is ramping down at the same rate. It's going to ramp back down to 0% over the course of a minute, 60 seconds. And it turns out, if you put half the required amount of mercury in here, it will stay at the same brightness level. And if you manage to get it charged all the way up to 100% brightness and then cut the mercury throughput in half, it will stay at 100% brightness. And again, also, at the moment, this wire isn't being used. These lamps aren't on, but they're still providing some brightness, and the solar panel is thus still providing some power. So this also reduces the power cost of the lamp by half. So using these tricks, we can actually get an efficiency that's more than double what we would normally. So now I'm going to show you how you can actually set that up. So this is a little bit more complicated. It's going to start off in a similar sort of way. We'll put another solar panel here. We'll put these lamps back in the same sort of position. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to set up a series of valves and shutoffs. Now the automation for this is a little bit wonky because the light sensor that we're actually going to be using to trigger the reduced flow rate of mercury once it's fully active, the light sensor only goes up to 15k lux, and the max brightness is 60k lux. So it's a little bit wonky, and I'm kind of hoping the devs are going to change that max brightness, maybe, to suit the new requirement. I guess we'll see. But we'll just put the valves here. So we're going to have 4 different valves. We're going to have 2 valves for each lamp. And this one is going to be set to the full flow rate of mercury for this lamp, which is 130 grams per second. And this is going to be set to half the flow rate, so 65 grams per second. And you will need a duplicant to come and set these. So here is our duplicant. Welcome, Ellie. So you're going to go set all of these. So we're going to put in the liquid valves. We're then also going to put in some liquid shutoffs. It doesn't matter what refined metal these are made out of. Obviously, don't make them out of mercury because they'll melt. So we're going to put them here. I'm just making everything out of copper in general in this case. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up the pipe so that it's coming from our input source. In this case, we're actually going to move it up here. And then we're just going to have it go across and down to each of these valves. And then the valves are going to connect to each of their respective shutoffs. And then what we're going to do is the shutoffs are going to meet in the middle and then go to each of their respective lamps, like this. It doesn't really matter where they're positioned. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to recirculate all of this. So we will put an outlet coming through here for any excess mercury. The lamps don't store excess mercury in them, so if we pump more than it requires, it will just go through the bypass. We'll put a bridge here as well, so that will ensure that all the excess mercury comes off of here. And then that is just going to merge back into the pipe here. And that's going to recirculate any excess mercury so it goes back through the valves and the shutoffs. So that's the piping system. Next, we have the automation. So, again, we're just going to make this out of copper. We're going to put in some light sensors. One for each lamp. We're going to set these to below 15,000 lux, which is unfortunately the highest amount we can do. We would prefer to have it at 60,000 lux, but that won't do. So instead, what we're actually going to do is we're going to set up some automation wires. These are going to go around the mercury lamps, and they're going to go into some buffer gates. And what we're going to do is we're going to set them to 45 seconds. So what this will do, because this will be triggered when the lamp reaches 15,000 lux, 45 seconds later, it's going to reach 60,000 lux. And I copy and pasted that setting to the wrong thing. We'll copy and paste it over here. Now this is set for the same 45 seconds. So what this will do is it will deactivate the signal once it's reached maximum brightness. Now, unfortunately, this isn't exactly foolproof, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but for general use, it should be fine. So then what we're going to do is we're going to extend that wire up here. We're going to put NOT gates in. There's a NOT gate. It is here. We're going to put a NOT gate in here. We're going to put a NOT gate in here. And I'm actually going to do something different. We're going to swap the 65 so it's on the inside. And we're going to put the 130 on the outside. So that way, with the NOT gates facing where they are, it's going to correspond to the correct valves. So the automation wire is going to continue here, and then the NOT signal is going to continue here. So yeah, in this case, in both cases, the ordinary signal should deactivate the 130 grams per second valve via shutoff when the light brightness reaches max. And then it will activate the reduced flow rate shutoff at 65 grams per second. Right, so we filled up our pipe with mercury on both ends. One thing to note, you do want to make sure this exit here is plugged into the bridge entrance here. Not the way I had it before. Because this way, all of the excess mercury that could end up in here from a deactivation will just cycle back around through the bridge. So now, what we'll do is we'll just connect all of our valves back up. And we'll start feeding in the mercury. Connect the pipes like that. We'll get a little bit of mercury in here. Obviously, because at the moment, the brightness isn't high enough, it's going to feed in the maximum 130 grams per second to power it up. Once it goes past 25%, these will deactivate, and then the buffer gates set to 45 seconds will activate. And we'll wait a bit longer for those to go through, so we're on speed 3 here. It does take a little while for it to power up all the way up to 100%. And now, if we pause just before it deactivates, you'll see this is fully charged, this one's at 98%. So now it's all fully powered. And now the automation is activating here, so this shutoff gets powered instead of this shutoff over here. So now the Mercury is going to come in at the reduced flow rate of 65 grams per second instead of 130 grams per second. So now you'll see it's flickering on and off. This is a sign that it's working. So notice the brightness is it's fluctuating between 99% and 100%. But the solar panel output is staying around 380 watts. It's very marginally less, but it's practically there. And we have actually got half the effective mercury consumption. We know this because it's all going through these valves here. A little bit is still going into the end of this valve here, but it's not actually going into the shutoff. And when this switches again, for whatever reason, the excess mercury will just get dumped over here. So this is now working. And also, if we look at the wire here, so we'll disconnect the dev power source now so you can see it's all self-powering. You'll see the power load on the wire is actually fluctuating between 140 and 260 watts. So the effective power consumption of this mercury lamp that's fluctuating is half of 60, which is 30 watts. Now, we are still using 10 watts on the liquid shutoff to make sure that we're getting the right flow rate that we want. And I think there's definitely a way that we could possibly improve the automation such that we're not having to run a shutoff and run the extra 10 watts. But the difference in overall efficiency is going from about 2.31 kilojoules per kilogram of mercury using the shutoff to 2.46 kilojoules per kilogram theoretical maximum efficiency of this fluctuating lamp approach. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So now we're generating 300 watts net with the solar panel, and we're only consuming 130 grams per second of mercury total rather than 260 over here. So the efficiency is quite a lot better in terms of material efficiency than before, and also compared to a petroleum generator. However, the issue is with a petroleum generator, all the inputs are theoretically sustainable. You turn the wood into ethanol from the fluxes, and that's all sustainable if you manage to do it right. But you don't get all the byproducts, and it's relatively easy to set up once you manage to just unlock the technology for all of this, which doesn't require anything too advanced. Just a little bit of radiation. And yeah, it's pretty good. However, there is a second way to use mercury to generate power, a little bit more indirectly. So this is actually using a building I very rarely use, called the power control station. And we'll just clear a little bit more space down here, and we'll make a little room so you can see what I mean. So this is a 76 size room. That's fine. So the power control station must be placed in a room between 12 and 96 tiles, and generators built within a power plant room with a power control station can be tuned up to improve their power production. So we'll put this station in here. Don't make this one out of mercury. Actually, I suppose it doesn't really matter too much, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the mercury to make microchips. So what this building does, it uses 5 kilograms of refined metal at a time to make a microchip. It takes a duplicate with 0 machinery skill, 15 seconds to make a microchip, and then they can apply it to a wide range of power-generating buildings to increase their throughput by 50%. So it's the coal generator, hydrogen generator, manual generator, the wheel, natural gas generator, the petroleum generator, which is a relevant one in this case, and the steam turbine and the wood burner. Notably, you can't use it to increase the efficiency of solar panels. So unfortunately, you can't combine the power control station with the mercury automation setup over here to get even more efficiency out of your mercury. But direct power, you have to use it indirectly to improve another power source. So in this case, we'll just put, say, a petroleum generator here, for instance, and we'll just put some more insulated tile over here, and then we'll make that an insulated room. Now, if you're using mercury for these microchips, you need to actively cool the room down to minus 40 degrees C. So you will need some kind of liquid cooling setup using a thermo aqua tuner and some radiant pipes to keep it all below minus 40 degrees C. However, if you're doing that, then you can make the microchips in here. Your duplicants can apply them via a tune-up to the generator, and then that building will have a 50% increased power output. So I'm going to set all this stuff up, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Alright, we're back. So what I've done is I've just set up a little rudimentary setup to illustrate the concept of using the microchips. I'm not going to go into the specifics too much. You've seen me do that a lot in the other videos. I just want to talk specifically about the use of mercury in a case like this. So we have a thermo aqua tuner loop, which we're currently filling with nectar, which we've established from previous videos is the best new coolant for thermo aqua tuners in general. It has a great temperature range, much better than polluted waters, and it has the same heat capacity. So it's an ideal liquid for us to use as a coolant for a thermo aqua tuner. Mercury is a very bad liquid to use for a thermo aqua tuner because the heat capacity is so low. It's not going to be very efficient. So don't do that. And also don't put it in a metal refinery because then it's just going to explode because the heat capacity is so low it's going to immediately turn into gas no matter what refined metal you're trying to make in the metal refinery. So we've set this pipe thermosensor to run the aqua tuner if the liquid is above minus 35 degrees C. We've got our liquid bridge set up here so that the liquid is dumping first onto the insulated pipe from the aqua tuner. So it's always prioritizing the cooled liquid over just recirculating the liquid. But once the liquid doesn't need cooling, it will still recirculate and distribute the temperature. So this is going to cool the temperature of the room down to the point where this little layer of mercury we put in at the bottom is all going to solidify into little debris. And then we're going to tell people to use the mercury to actually make some microchips once it's all done. What you'll notice we've also done here is we've actually put a layer of mercury underneath the aqua tuner. And this is very good because it's a very effective conductor, much better than oil, and it's not going to boil in here because the temperature range is fine. So I generally prefer using mercury to oil now for cases like this, where I can get away with it. And it's going to take a while for this little bit of water that we put in here to boil into steam as well, but then when it does, it'll run the steam turbine. And we can also use the mercury microchips to tune the steam turbine. So we'll illustrate that in a minute. How can we possibly do one of these videos without having a little bit of duplicant suffering in here? So now you'll see all of the mercury has cooled to the point where it's a solid, and this is good because it means it's actually at the point where we can make microchips. You can also see it's immediately melted again. Now the issue is, she's put the mercury in here, but the room is still relatively warm. The mercury is rapidly heating up, and it's actually going to melt again before she can finish making the microchip. So you can see it's actually stopped making the microchip because the mercury is melted. So what we'll do is we'll actually insulate this room a little bit better. So maybe we'll do it like that. A good thing for us to do as well could be to put in a vacuum seal. So we could make a little vacuum seal over here quick. In this case, what we'll do is we'll put some... Doesn't really matter too much what we put here. I'm just going to put some naphtha here because it's nice and viscous. So we'll put like 30 kilograms of, say, 30 degrees C naphtha. That's going to stay nice and cold. That doesn't freeze until minus 50 degrees C, so that's going to be absolutely fine. And then we'll just put a little tile here, and then we'll remove it again. That's going to leave a vacuum. So now this room is completely heat sealed. We've got the mercury running around in here. So if we set this to green at minus 41 C, you'll see the room is getting to the temperature where the mercury is all solidified now. And she's actually managed to make a microchip, which is good. Once the microchip has been made, this is made out of genetic ooze. So the microchip is not going to melt no matter what you do with it, which is good. So now what she could do is she could actually, well, she's going to pee herself because this is an Arisa gaming video. Of course that's going to happen. But then what she can do is she can actually tune this up. So she'll have an errand to deliver the microchip. In fact, let's actually get you to stop making a microchip now. Let's see what this does. For the moment, this is going to generate 2 kilowatts when it's running. And you'll see this errand takes a long time to apply. If your duplicate has 0 operating skill, it's going to take 180 seconds. So if you're doing something in a case like this, you might actually want a motion sensor and a lamp specifically for when your duplicate is doing the tuning. So what we'll do is we'll put it, say, here, and then have a lamp over here. We'll just hook this up like this, and then we'll plug the wire in. So now you're going to get the lit workspace bonus, and you're going to tune this a lot faster. The cool thing about this as well is that this bit has a special gun for this. I've never seen them use this gun because I never used the power control station, but that's probably going to change. Obviously in this case we're using the mercury because it's super abundant in a super cold environment. If you get into the oil biome and you find a load of lead, and you've already got your metal volcanoes set up so that you've got lots of refined metal for construction, etc., you can turn all that lead into microchips. And that's going to be a very resource-efficient way of increasing the output of your power station. But just to go through the maths of that for a little bit. So, using 5 kilograms of mercury or lead in a microchip in a wood burner, which is the least efficient power generator. If that wood burner is continuously operating, that's going to produce an extra 150 watts for 1,800 seconds minimum. The duration increases with the operating skill as well of the duplicate applying the tinkering. So that's going to be 270 kilojoules of energy minimum from 5 kilograms of mercury, which is a lot. And the efficiency just gets better and better from there. So now you'll see the petroleum generator has had the NG's tune-up buff applied. It increases power output by 50%. In this case, the buff is going to last for 3.7 cycles, which is a fairly long time. And now this is going to generate 3 kilowatts instead of 2. So what we'll do now is we'll disconnect this, and you'll see it's giving 3 kilowatts here. Obviously, we haven't set up our power system to manage this properly, but that's the thing. We can do the same for the steam turbine as well, so we'll do that while we talk about some of these other things. Now, you can't actually set this to make a limited amount of microchips, so what we'll do is we'll set this to priority 5, we'll set the steam turbine and the petroleum generator to priority 9, and then she'll prioritize applying the microchips rather than making them continuously. Now, obviously, this math is just suggesting that this is running continuously, which it probably isn't. But even if it's running at only 5% of the time, this is still a more resource-efficient way of using the mercury to generate power than using it to directly power a solar panel. But it does require the cooled room, which is going to use some power. It does require the duplicate labor and the lengthy tune-up session. So what I would suggest is a good workflow for getting your power online on this Frosty Planet. Get your bulk of your mercury into the solar panels to start, and to use that power to jumpstart the rest of your industry via steam turbines or petroleum generators. And then you could use the rest of the mercury to set up the power control station to make the microchips. At which point you can probably stop running this because you'll have a lot more extra power. But it's always nice to have this as a backup power option because it doesn't produce any real waste products. So, yeah, that pretty much summarizes using mercury for power in the power station. There is actually a third way of using mercury for power as well, which I'm going to talk about now, and it's the Bonbon Tree. We've been neglecting this guy. So this tree, when this tree is lit up and it's fed snow, if domesticated, it produces nectar, which, as we discussed, is this very useful liquid resource that has a great temperature range and can be useful for running some aqua tuners. However, the other use of nectar is the Spigot Seals will consume nectar and turn it into ethanol at a 1-to-1 ratio. So what we could do is we could actually use the Mercury Ceiling Light, set it up for some Bonbon Trees, and then we can directly compare the energy density of the ethanol you get out with the Spigot Seals to just using it in a solar panel. So we're going to do that now. So, what we've got over here now, we've got 2 Bonbon Trees planted one directly underneath the other. We have a Mercury Ceiling Light producing the full 60,000 lux from the top, and we've actually put in 2 window tiles down here to let the light through. So if we look at this first Bonbon Tree, first Bonbon Tree is getting the full 60,000 lux. The Bonbon Tree doesn't need the light to grow, it only needs to be fertilized with the snow to grow. It needs 100 kilograms of snow per cycle. There's obviously lots of this on the map, on the frozen frosty asteroids, but if you need to make it as well, you can use the Ice Maker to make it. And as we discussed previously, the Ice Maker is very effective at deleting heat, so you may want to have one of them around anyways to do that. So you'll use that to get the snow to get this to grow. And then if we look at the light underneath the window tiles, you can see we've actually got 30,000 lux down here on these 4 tiles. We've got 20,000 lux on these tiles. So the first Bonbon Tree is going to get most of the light, but the second one is still going to get a good amount of light to 6 different branch locations. And the branches will grow out of the trees as they get to full size, and then the branches will start to absorb all the light. And when that happens, the trees will produce the nectar, and then the nectar can be turned by the Spigot Seals into ethanol. So we're going to get these trees grown under the snow and the light, and we'll see what comes out of it. Also, it is worth actually mentioning, the Bonbon Tree won't grow unless it's below minus 15 degrees C. There is a little bit of heat generated by these lamps. It's not a huge amount, but eventually you may reach a point where you may need to actively cool these as well. Just below minus 15 degrees C will do. It doesn't have to be mercury freezing levels of temperature. But yeah, I'll see you in a minute. So, we're back. We've let the Bonbon Trees grow for a little bit, so now you can see the main tree trunk itself has grown, and the branches are starting to grow. If we hover over it at the moment, it's saying that nectar production is halted. The branches must be fully grown and exposed to light in order to be productive. Optimal productivity is achieved at 5 branches with 10,000 lux each. So, the important thing to note is, with our mercury lamp where it is, obviously the top tree, all of the light is available, so this tree is going to produce its 80 kilograms per cycle of nectar, no issues. The light down here is also good enough, Shinebug notwithstanding, to actually produce the maximum amount of nectar, even though it's reduced. Now, obviously, a lot of this light is being wasted, but there is still some efficiency to be had. The mercury lamp in this case is using 130 grams per second of mercury to fuel the growth of 2 Bonbon Tree branches. 2 sets of Bonbon Trees branches, which will produce a total of 160 kilograms per cycle of nectar, which is the equivalent of 266.7 grams per second of nectar. And if we use the Spigot Seals, turn all of the nectar into ethanol, that gives us 266.7 grams per second of ethanol. If we run that through a normal petroleum generator, that's going to give us a net of 206.7 watts minus the 60 from the Mercury Ceiling Light, and from 130 grams per second of mercury, so that's an energy density of 1.59 kilojoules per kilogram, i.e., using the Bonbon Trees and the Spigot Seals to get the power from a petroleum generator is up to 60% more efficient in terms of energy density of the mercury compared to using solar panels. And again, oh, this is all freezing up here, blimey. Well, again, we could use this setup over here as well, with the valves and shutoffs as described previously, to improve the efficiency of this Mercury Ceiling Light again. So that would actually take it to a net of 226.7 watts from only 65 grams per second of mercury, which is an energy density of 3.49 kilojoules per kilogram, which is substantially better. However, we do still have to supply the Bonbon Trees with 100 kilograms per cycle of snow each. And if you're getting it from the map, great. If you're not, you are running an Ice Maker to do that, so it does reduce the efficiency a little bit. And also, you do need to be looking after the Spigot Seals and getting them to do stuff. We'll do another video on Spigot Seals once we've actually had some experience with branching them. I don't really want to jump the gun on that. But suffice it to say, it's not really that much more efficient power-wise than just hooking up the solar panels. It's a lot of extra effort. And I suppose the advantage is you can use the ethanol from the Bonbon Trees in the petroleum generator. You can use the power control station to increase the efficiency of that yet again. But this is a lot of duplicate labor and complexity, whereas the solar panel works just with the shutoffs and the valves over here. Now, you can see what's actually happened over here. This has... what has happened over here is this has dropped and it's ended up at a slightly lower lux value. And the alteration's kicked in, so it's staying at this 72% brightness range. And this one's lower at 62%, which is not good. Because this stuff's been all heating up, cooling down over here too much. Not good. What I would recommend for this as well, as a backup, is if you notice that something's wrong like that, you can take a signal switch, build it in here, and then if you want to flip this, you can just flip it every now and then, and it will reactivate it and get it back up to the 100%. But yeah, that's pretty much the setup, and that's pretty much mostly what I wanted to talk about with Mercury. You could use this refined metal to generate power in 3 different ways. You could either do it using the solar panels and a little bit of automation to eke more power generation out of your Mercury throughput. You can feed it to the Bonbon Trees and then use the Spigot Seals to turn the nectar from these Bonbon Trees into ethanol, which produces slightly more power per kilogram of mercury, but has a lot of extra complexity that may not necessarily be your cup of tea. And there is also just using the mercury to make microchips and get the NG's tune-up on your other power generators, including the petroleum generator you may use for the ethanol for this. Overall, this is the most resource-efficient way of using your mercury to increase your power generation, but it does require you to have a second independent power source. So this is really good for starting up your colony, because it's completely independent, it's completely clean power, there's no waste products like with the petroleum generator, and it can solve a lot of your early game problems. And I'm sure there's other use cases for mercury. So leave me a comment if there's any other interesting cases you found with this, or if you think you have a better way of automating the liquid into the pipes here. Very interested to see how you guys are all using Mercury now that it's available to us. If you liked the video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more build guide content like this, Oxygen not included. We look at other games as well, like Balatro, Dyson Sphere Program, and so on and so forth. And we are streaming on Twitch. We go live Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, usually 7:30 to 10:30 British time. We are playing the Blasted series, Seed in the lab at the moment. We just found all the magma underneath the main asteroid, so we're having a lot of fun with that. We are using the Mercury solar panels on that, but I'm going to switch it over to this, because obviously it's much more efficient. We'll see how that goes. But thanks for hanging out, and yeah, let me know what you like to do with your Mercury. It's just gross, and it gets everywhere, and somehow it doesn't poison all the dupes. Yeah, thanks very much for watching. Take it away, Whiskers. Bye for now.
Whiskers sends thanks to the following Twitch subscribers and YouTube members: 999999999, FRD. It's Chili Chili, Kujia Jizia, Neo Deus Machina, Porcelet, Sinister Plank, Sweet Danger Kitty, The Max Not Binary, and Uglavisk.